In late June, 70 researchers and farmers took part in a WA Livestock Research Council by invitation study tour to the UWA Research Farm in West Pingelly. On site, they were treated to a broad range of presentations that provided an insight into the extent of projects underway and the degree of collaboration between WA's livestock research community. We continue our video series with Andrew Thompson from Murdoch University. He asks, are big ewes more profitable than small ones?
Essentially, developing systems to enable us to select sheep that make more money per hectare. I guess forever, about 200 years, I think, we've selected sheep based on production per head. And I guess you talk to consultants, and generally there's not a great relationship between profit and traits that we select for in terms of per head production. Those people that have or where attempts have been made to try to predict production per hectare, generally it is assumed that heavier animals eat more, therefore you must run less of them, okay? And if stocking rate's compromised, your profit goes out the window. We've been, I think that's been, I guess we've known that's a flaw for some time. I guess secondly is that we assume that there are no differences in the use of energy, in the partitioning of that energy between fat and protein and so on. And that's flawed as well, okay? And this is just, I'll tell you what we did in a minute, but the point of this figure up here is two sires exactly the same weight, so two sire teams, they both average 60 kilos, okay? One sire team, their maximum intake 16 megajoules a day, and one is 21 megajoules a day, okay? So, in other words, live weight does not necessarily drive intake. They are different things, or can be different things. The other one, and you've seen this, and you've been participating in weather trials, or you've run your own progeny evaluations, or you've been here to the MLP field day, there are huge differences in condition score going into summer, or any time of that, for that matter, between sire teams. And we see it here. Again, both equal weight. One sire team averages 15% body fat, and one averages 25, okay? And yet those traits are not considered in how we select sheep, okay? Basically, as I said, we pick them on per head production, and we don't consider just how many of those animals you may be able to run. So what we did in MLP, so we took the brothers, so the brothers to the animals that run here that Bron spoke about, and we did two things. First off, we ran them here at Ridgefield until 3-year-old, okay? So beyond a normal weather trial, I guess, to provide some better data on productivity that we could then use in our economic modelling. And then over the course of 2 years, the team basically, we sent those animals to Katanning, to the Katanning Research Facility and the animal house down there, and 640 animals went through individual pens, 160 at a time, and they were in there for about 90 days. Fed different levels of nutrition, maintenance, live weight gain, live weight loss, weighed 3 times a week, fed every day, wool growth measurements, whole body composition measurements, something like 2,000 DEXA measurements. I just worked out, that's whatever, 4 months work, 5 months work by a whole team. Huge amount of work went into that. And I guess from that, then it's around the economic modelling. Okay, so then we handballed all the numbers to John Young, and from that point, I guess we've worked out a few things. And this is a work in progress. Okay, this project's still got 2 years to run, but I guess what are the early indications? Well, but even before we gave it to John, I mean, fatter animals, okay, they eat less, they have a lower maintenance requirement, and when they do have excess energy, they're more efficient at partitioning that into further energy reserves, okay? So if they both eat 10 megajoules, an animal that's fatter will put more into fat, okay? This is based on an X-ray scan, a DEXA scan. It's actually measured whole body fat at this point. Is it correlated with their breeding values for fat? Yes. Not great though. Okay, so So John modelled this, so taking all the breeding values out of the ewes here and the extra measurements on the boys, but also considering these new traits we're calling stocking rate traits, okay, what they actually ate and what their energy reserves were, okay? And as I said, that's indicating two things. One, that fatter animals are more profitable per hectare, but more importantly, because we don't have all the answers, is that the correlation between how we currently value animals, whether that be production per head or a stab at production per hectare based on metabolic live weight, is very poorly correlated to the new way of doing it. What I mean by poor, an R squared of 0.3, for those who are familiar with R squareds, okay? There's lots and lots of scatter around the line, okay? What's that mean? To me, it means there's a better way of doing things, okay? Here I'm acknowledging we don't have the answers, all the answers yet, but what we can say is that we're not doing a very good job currently at how we value animals in terms of genetic gains in production per hectare. Where to now? I guess we've still got work to do in developing economic values for these new traits, intake and whole body energy, we're calling it. The work currently happening at Ridgefield here now is to develop the genetic the heritabilities and genetic correlations with other traits, okay? Again, there's probably a few bells going off around, you know, what about whole body energy and wool production and stuff, so forth. We need to understand those relationships. And then I guess that begs the question of how do we measure them? Okay, and you know, how do we measure feed intake and how do we measure whole body energy reserves? And maybe I can hold that. Where's Bron? Okay, yeah, maybe we can. We got a little bit of a display down the back later on. We can talk a little bit more about those measurements. But we are using obviously condition score. You know, it would be nice, Dawson, if we didn't need a new measurement. I mean, we don't want to be running around with X-ray machines and stuff. Of course, you know, can we just use condition score or ultrasound, our current measurements, but just have a far better economic value for those traits? Okay, that's the best outcome. Okay, but we're also looking at leptin. Thanks, Dom. I think I saw Dom here somewhere. D2O, another measurement for measuring whole body fat reserves. And then for intake, we're using sensors. The AWI smart tags and Betty and so forth will talk about these a little bit more, but we're using sensors to try to predict feed intake and also the chambers down here to measure methane production. We'll talk about that later.
If that's something you're going to work out with the studies, how much wool cut you give up, or have you calculated with those animals that are laying down the fat? Is that free fat, or is there energy that could have gone to wool cut, alternative to that fat? So that energy, are they partitioning energy into fat rather than other products on their body is what I was wondering.
The sample size is really small, Ed, as you'd appreciate, 640 animals, and obviously we'll have 900 and something here when that's added together. But at the moment, there's no genetic correlation between wool cut, or phytodomina for that matter, and whole body energy reserves. So, again, that's not final, and geneticists would shudder at the size of that data set, okay, but that's the indication at the moment. It is being measured, and it doesn't look like the alarm bells are going off. But you know, I bet if we took, you know, Ashley or Linley's data and also looked at breeding values versus fat, the relationship's pretty weak. We get carried away with it. It's, you know, it's an R squared of less than 0.1. In other words, there's huge scope, you know, to select animals that are fatter and cut lots of wool. And you can run at high stocking rate.
Tomo, what's your gut feel over here? Sorry. What's your gut feel about where all that intake energy is going on that other second sire group, if it's not going into fat and may not be going into wool?
I think, again, seeing Dave Masters and others in the crowd who you know, I'm a proxy physiologist. You know, normally Sarah would be here to help me. But look, I think just fat is very efficient to turn over, to keep, and you know, so recycling. This is part of it, Mandy. I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure there's more to it, but you know, we tend to think of fat as a bad thing. Okay, but it's actually very efficient in an adult animal to lose weight as fat and to gain weight as fat. Okay, and just to keep fat. Okay, as opposed to doing that as protein. I'm sure that's part of it. Okay, that's why I think these fatter animals, you know, their maintenance requirement is you know, what we're measuring is 1 to 2 megajoules per day less, okay, across our 15 to 25% range in whole body fat. Does that sort of answer a bit?
Sorry, so the sire group 2, who've got a large intake of megajoules, they're using their energy somewhere else running around, or
or
what is it?
Or putting it into
Into
could,
protein?
Could protein? Yeah, that's part of the answer. Yep, we have got. Have we? Is it running around? We've got a lot of activity data. So all these animals all actually went into another project at looking at with sensors, and part of that was to measure activity, and that we haven't looked at that data yet.
Tomo, you're using the description fatness a lot.
Yeah.
What about size? So body weight.
Right, I forgot to. It was on my sheet, and I forgot to answer what I was asked to talk about. There was, thank you, Tim. That didn't even set him up. Zero correlation with size between our estimates of profit per hectare. Okay, taking into consideration what animals eat and their energy reserves. No correlation whatsoever with size. So are big sheep less profitable or more profitable? I think you had. I think I hear it the other way around. Don't worry about it. You know, I think there's other things that have a bigger impact on profit per hectare than size.
Following on that, have you ever tried to do what in human is called body mass index?
Yeah, we did. We had Brittany Bolt did her honours in it, a couple of years ago now. We measured body mass index, and the best predictor of whole body energy reserves is what we're trying to measure, was chest circumference. Okay, and I guess the idea was could we, by image analysis and machine learning, just take pictures of animals and tell us how much fat's in there. Okay, but chest circumference is probably the most difficult. If it was height or hip width or something like that, stature, little short legs and so on, chest depth, but they weren't as good as ultrasound. Chest circumference was slightly better than ultrasound, but hard to measure.
Guy Bowen here, Andrew. There's a lot of work going on, trialling work going on around Australia in all sorts of ways. You're obviously linked into the results of various sheep genotypes because obviously the research tends to be fairly merino orientated. So can you sort of tell us how alert current scientific research is to the whole picture of what's happening elsewhere? I mean, obviously you are, Jason Tromp and those sort of guys.
Are you asking, is there a place for this work with maternals?
Well, I suppose with anything, I mean, obviously, when you're looking for outstanding performance in these fields, there's lots of, I assume, reasonable work being done on different sheep genotypes. Look, I guess, Guy, to be quite honest with you, there's been huge pushback. This project was born in 2006. Okay, so it took about half of my professional career for AWI to have the courage to fund it. In other words, there's been great pushback from people in power around the role of fat. Okay, there's been great resistance to just fat as a trait. I think because maybe we're dominated by meat science or something. I don't know. But so we have had a crack at trying to get a similar project up in as GEPEP or in the maternal side, but that was a few years ago and it didn't go anywhere. Okay, but I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or just or not. But I'm not aware of any work that's really looking at breeding for stocking rate in anything else than what we're doing here.